and welcome to round 4 here at Grand Prix Portland. We see here on the left-hand side of our screen, that's Randy Kaech, Stone Kaech, and Richie Kaech. The Kaeches all playing together there. I'm guessing that up against Arilax, Randy Kaech, the dad of this equation. The dad of the equation on the other side, sat in the middle, is Alex Hayne, but we're going to be starting with Craig Wescoe, who is up against Richie Kaech. So on the left of our screen, Kaech there starting off with a Child of Night after a Typhoid Rats. On the other side of things, that looks to be a Selfless Cathar and a Welkin turn. So both players starting off with a 1 drop into a 2-1. It's just a matter of which one of the 2-1s is going to be the better one here. I mean, one's got life gain, one's going to be tricky to block. I mean, anytime that Wesco has a white creature on the board, you have to think that he's a force to be reckoned with. He is, of course, the guy for playing white decks, and he's won a Pro Tour that way.
He certainly has. I mean, and to be honest, the strategy that he used to win that Pro Tour was successful recently as well, because Jackson Cunningham's green-white deck is very much in the same vein as Wesco's Celestia deck from his Pro Tour. So we are looking, at least initially, like we're off to a fairly even parity for start. Richie's going to get in with those Typhoid Rats. There's no way that I think Craig's going to trade off that Selfless Cathar, which could have a significantly greater value for him later on in the game.
Netcaster Spider from Richie Kaech there, though, potentially quite a nice pickup, because it will be able to block the Welkin turn quite happily. That the 2-3 with reach, that if it blocks a flyer, it gets +2 power. So it basically blocks every power successfully.
And Void Snare is going to return that to his hand, though, giving him an opportunity to get in for an extra 2 points of damage.
I mean, Void Snare is a funny one, because to me, I often feel like it doesn't do quite enough. I mean, there effectively it got played for sort of a fairly temporary tempo boost, and Wesco without the 4th land to be able to really put pressure on. We see Richie Kaech there hitting his quite happily, and he's got something else on the 4 now.
Living Totem, I believe?
That looks like it. No Convoke there this time. He's just going to stick his +1/+1 counter. Where's it going to go? I mean,
on the Child of Night, I think he indicated. So
there we go.
Turns that 2-1 lifelinker into a 3-powered lifelinker that can make sure that this time, if Craig wants to trade off that Selfless Cathar, he's not going to be able to. Yeah,
I mean, with just the Vampire coming in, 3 damage, 3 points of lifelink. Nice little spot there for Richie Kaech. I'm guessing that, I mean, normally you would say that the blue-white tempo deck kind of is the one that's going to be getting the early aggression in here. It looks like Wesco having a little bit of trouble doing that, though. Oh, this is interesting. Wesco's just played his land. He's got another land in hand. Does that mean that he chose not to play a land last turn?
I think it's entirely possible. We came into this just a little bit late. Are we sure he wasn't on the draw for this match?
Possibly, yeah. Another Void Snare. I mean, the second Void Snare quite a bit more powerful than the first, because at least it's got rid of that +1/+1 counter. So the Child of Night, if it comes back down, isn't going to be looking too impressive.
If Void Snare is a reasonable card in an aggressive deck, if Wesco's deck is filled, you don't usually see Welkin turns being played in the blue decks unless they happen to be like the aggressive form of that deck. And Void Snare gives you a much greater opportunity to kind of push through those advantages like he's doing right now. And it also serves really well, assuming your deck has an Illusory Angel. It gives you a nice cheap way to get some sort of benefit and still get that 4/4 flyer into play. Not sure if Wesco has one of those in his deck or not. Don't have the list in front of us just yet, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me.
And there come back the creatures that got bounced earlier on, so the Netcaster Spider and the Child of Night, both coming down there, and meaning that Richie Kaech's side of the board looking pretty positive. Now, it looks like on the other side of things, yeah, another Griffin there for Craig Wesco. He's very much about the Air Force, and that Air Force in a lot of trouble just against the one Spider. If there's any kind of follow-up to that from Richie Kaech, then he might well be able to take down this first game against the Pro Tour champion. Yeah,
the Spider is one of those cards that was frequently in the discussion for being the best green card or green common in the set.
Wow.
It was right up there with Siege Worm as very clearly on people's radars as being incredibly powerful. One of the big reasons is there just aren't a tremendously large number of answers to creatures with evasion in this format, and having a 2/3 that can effectively shut down any of the flyers on the opposing side of the table is an incredibly powerful card.
Now, it looks to me like there might be an Ob Nixilis Unshackled in Richie Kaech's hand. He's just 1 mana off being able to cast it. If that comes down, it potentially could spell an awful lot of trouble for Craig Wesco. if every time a creature dies, it will get a +1/+1 counter. It doesn't take very long for it to become the flying, trampling demon of Craig Wescoe's nightmares.
Right. At the time being, Wesco's got a reasonable defense set up against it. I mean, it's still going to be effectively close to a Wrath of God, if not just a way to kill 2 creatures on Wesco's side. But eventually, yeah, with the number of creatures that Richie's got on his side of the board, he's going to be able to start basically suiciding them in or offering them as trades to Wesco, just further growing that Obnixilus if it hits play.
So an interesting set of attacks here from Richie Kaech, potentially signaling some kind of a trick to come from him. And there we see it. A Titanic growth on the Child of Night, meaning that he's able to successfully kill off one of Craig Wescoe's blockers. And that's something that sets up really, really nicely for the potential flying, rare, legendary demon that tramples. I mean, doesn't come out very often. It does penalize searching decks also. It's a very, very powerful rare and one that might be a bit of a problem for Craig Wescoe, who's very light on white mana thus far.
Yeah, Richie Kaech is punishing Wesco right now. He's got so many creatures on the table. I mean, he's got enough creatures on the table that he has to overlap him to make sure that they stay on the camera. This is going to be a really tough situation for Wesco to deal with. That Wesco Swiftclaw, it's incredibly insubstantial against the creatures that Kaech has got in play.
The Swiftclaw is an interesting one. I was speaking to Tom Martell and David Ochoa earlier on about over and underrated cards in the format. And Ochoa's response on overrated cards in the format, at least for sealed, is things with 1 toughness. There's a lot of ways to make 1/1 tokens, and a 3/1 is very, very frequently just not going to do a whole lot on an awful lot of different boards.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that there are a lot of high-impact creatures that have 1 toughness in this format, and because this is close to a block-constructed format, the way that you're able to build decks with such a rich pool, every red deck is going to have Forge Double. Every black deck is going to have access to Fester, Gloom, and Crippling Blight. So those 1 toughness creatures really, really don't get the job done nearly as well as they do in for a draft format, for example.
So Richie Kaech there plays his Obnixilus Unshackled, immediately attacks with his entire team. And this really puts Craig Wescoe to some difficult decisions because, yes, he's offering up lots of trades, but every trade that happens is going to give Obnixilus a +1/+1 counter. And once it's I mean, with the current blocks, it would end up being an 8/8 after combat. 8/8 Flying Trample demands a very specific set of answers. Now, Blue-White's actually relatively well positioned to have those answers because bounce spells are good against it.
Devouring Light.
Pillar of Light.
Pillar of Light,
yeah. All of these are fine answers, but at the same time, he'd much rather not have to try and find them.
Exactly.
I mean, it's an 8/8. Craig Wescoe on 10 life does not have much time.
Not to mention if he's looking for one of those as an answer to that. I mean, he's facing down a 2/3 and a set of 1/1s when he's at 6 life that he can't block because Walk-in Turn is high flying. So
yeah, high flying being it can only block flyers. So the only thing it can block is an 8/8 Trampler.
Yeah,
which is not ideal.
1 toughness creatures do a very bad job against trample. Last I checked.
And 2/1's not much better.
No.
So Richie Kaech here, thinking about his situation before he commits to any big attacks, but I think it's safe to say that if he makes a big attack here, he's not going to get punished too badly for it.
No, I mean, especially considering Wesco only has a single plains. Like, he might be leery of a Devouring Light in a situation where he had either a white creature in play or a second plains, but I think at this point when you're this far ahead, you kind of force it. So Quickling looks like it's going to save him for a turn, but
well, I mean,
I don't think that works out the way that,
So, yeah, normally speaking, if you block and... is something perhaps been missed there? Obnixilus definitely does have trample.
It's entirely possible that the judge watching the match didn't catch that, so we'll see if that gets resolved anytime in the immediate future. But in the meantime, looks like we are looking at a Precinct Captain, and is that another Welcome Turn, or the one that he just
it looks like they're just double reading Obnixilus, and yep,
okay, good.
That's enough to scoop up the cards. Glad that we caught that early, and it looks like we're going to get a chance to see a little bit of the rest of the Kaech clan playing out their matches. So Richie Kaech successfully defeats Craig Wescoe. Richie, the littlest of the Kaeches. We've now got Alex Hayne on the right of our screen, and he's up against Stone Kaech, and Stone looks to have a pretty dominating board position because that Soul of Theros, even with a stab wound, it can do some work.
I mean, the activated ability on Soul of Theros is incredible at turning games around. It has got a Hornet Queen-like ability to take a game that you have been crushed in and turn it around. Being able to give all of your creatures not only a boost to their combat stats, but to give them a lifelink and first strike means that combat never goes favorably for your opponent. And you can also take a life total. I mean, if life totals were reversed and it were Kaech was at 2, it would not surprise me in the fact that, okay, so it's 3 to 17. So now that we've seen these life totals, this is where we're going to get to see what Soul of Theros does in this situation.
And Stone Kaech has 2 great tricks in hand as well. He's got a Devouring Light, he's got a Sanctified Charge. The Devouring Light's probably going to be the most important thing initially because that Genesis Hydra is a 5/5 at present, that big enough to present a fairly clear and present danger. But in the meantime, Vigilance there on the Soul. It does everything, slicing, dicing, all of these things are fine.
He even makes a Julian lifelink. But it does have a stab wound on it, which means it's smaller than normal.
And it's dealing damage to Stone each turn. And on 3 life, he can't afford to take too many hits, aside from the whole lifelink.
Right. So the activation does come in, and it puts it back up to a 6/6 with lifelink. So Kaech is going to be able to set his life total up to 9, a prospective 7 on his upkeep, as well as dropping Hayne down to 11. This is when Hayne's life total is going to start to dip low enough that he might have to think twice about using that Shadowcloak Vampire's ability to jump. He does have a 5/5, but that 5/5, even if he takes this hit and goes down to 4, Stone is going to be able to survive a hit from that stab wound, and then Hayne has no defense against the attack. This is why Soul of Theros is so good. It makes you not only worry about that attack step you're in, but you have to think about the next turn. You can't swing back and nullify the amount of damage your opponent's done without opening an entire alleyway for them to get through for even more damage.
Yeah, I mean, Shadowcloak Vampire in other circumstances, effectively one of the biggest flyers in the format. At least at the rarity that it sits, just a common there. Both of these coming in, it looks like Alex Hayne is perfectly happy to just say, you know, block me if you want. You haven't got mana up to activate the Soul of Theros ability, so this is still an important attack.
Oh yeah, I mean, it looks like he went ahead and lifted up the Shadowcloak Vampire, so we're going to have to sacrifice that Cathar, dropping to 5 and then ultimately to 3 on his upkeep.
And it played a big role in the last game. It looks like it might do so again in this one.
Spidey.
Yeah, Netcaster Spider there, the 2/3 that does it all. And Stab Wound continuing to bleed there, Stone Kaech.
This looks like it's a situation we might see where the Soul of Theros is unable to turn the game around for a player.
I mean, that's really just down to Stone not having too many other creatures. He's just drawn a Paragon of the New Dawns there.
Yeah.
But that in and of itself is unlikely to be enough.
The stab wound itself is pretty massive in this game right now, too. It makes his soul small enough that it can't favorably block the Genesis Hydra. It also means that even if he chooses not to attack, it's just a steady stream of damage coming his way.
And the tricky bit for Stone really is here that he can't activate the ability on the Soul of Theros too much because he just doesn't have the mana available to do so and to deploy threats to the board. On its own, yes, it can pump itself, but that's not necessarily going to be enough to turn this around. Even if he drew a Raise the Alarm instead of that Paragon, he might be in quite a bit better shape.
He does have a sweet line ahead of him, though. He's got the ability now to block favorably the Genesis Hydra if he wants to, force Alex to pay life to try to jump over with that Vampire, and he's got a Devouring Light in his hand, which he can then use to remove it. So he's set up to survive this turn, assuming things change, and very likely come out of it ahead, should Hayne try to get crazy or frisky or anything. I think it's most likely that unless Hayne's got some sort of trick, he just makes his guy fly and attacks over, because it'd be very, very dangerous for him to simply pass the turn right here. Although, at the same time, if he does fear Devouring Light, he might not want to make the investment of that 2 life, because that would be also bad for him.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2-point chunks of life zipping about all over the place between Stab Wound and the Vampire there, and neither of these players really have a lot more life to give.
Right.
The big difference being that at the moment, Stone Kaech, the only player that has an obvious path to gain any life. Black actually quite well equipped to gain life in this format, more so than many others.
Right, so Hayne does bite, goes ahead and uses the vampire to fly, and decides to send the Genesis Hydra in as well. 5/5 into the 5/5 Soul of Theros that has Vigilance. So he's looking to offer the trade. Yeah, this is still pretty good for Hayne because it would just be a straight trade of the Soul of Theros for the Genesis Hydra, and he would be able to get rid of the Vampire, leaving Hayne with just the Netcaster Spider in play, but he'd only have his own Paragon.
Yeah, there's a tough moment in the game for Stone Kaech here. I mean, I think he probably knows what he has to do. It's just he's not going to be super happy about it.
Yeah.
Like, his board's not going to look great afterwards. Neither is Hayne's. I mean, he's going to have one activation left of the Soul of Theros from the graveyard. That one of the big powers of the souls that they'll always have some kind of an impact.
Exactly.
By virtue of that, but
it is important to note. I mean, Hayne has one card in his hand, so it looks like Stone is going to opt to take that hit from the stab wound, and so he does Devouring Light the Vampire, and he's just sacrificially losing his Paragon.
And there's another vampire.
All right, one that Alex can't activate. That guy is perpetually going to be bound to the ground unless he can find a way to gain some life.
It's a vampire that needs some blood.
It is.
If he's going to do anything.
Well, let's see. Stone is going to be left with a 4/4 vigilant creature that deals him 2 damage on his upkeep, so he'll go down to 1. Man, this is a tight one. 1 to 2 going into the last turn of the game.
Yeah, it seems likely to be the last turn. Sanctified Charge here, plus a land in Stone Kaech's hand. Not necessarily what he really needs. Yep. Basically, it's all down to him activating the Soul of Theros ability here. I mean, the attack here forces a block, and he's got the... I mean, it's currently a 4/4 with the stab wound on it.
Right.
Grows a little bit, gains first strike.
Yep.
Very, very important in this equation. And he has to do that just to survive, right?
Right. I mean, in order to survive this game, he's got to attack in, understand that he's going to be killing something small and gaining 6 life, and then next turn he's just going to have to take his Soul of Theros and trade it away. Very likely for the Shadow Cloak Vampire, and take the hit from the Hydra, and then hope that he has a way to survive next turn.
Yeah, it's hoping is definitely a big part of Stone Kaech's game plan at this point.
Well, I'm glad that we got to see a game like this as an illustration of ways to deal with the incredibly powerful Soul of Theros. Because it is just this does give him an interesting opportunity to just simply let the attack go through, kill off the Netcaster Spider, and then save his mana to use the activated ability on defense instead.
But surely if he does that, Alex Hayne can just elect to not attack at all.
Correct.
And then there's no way for Stone Kaech to gain any life.
And then he just
dies to the stab wound.
Exactly.
So Alex Hayne knows all this. He knows that basically this turn was entirely scripted.
Yep.
So he is played in such a fashion that he gives himself the best chance of getting through this little fracas and finding a way of winning it out.
So up to 7 means that he's going to have to, he has to...
Up to 6.
He gains 6 from 1.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yeah. Oh, Hunt the Weak is... well, that ends the problem right there. So
solve that issue. And
attack for the lethal.
Attacks. That gets game 1 there for Alex Hayne. So we've seen Richie Kaech. We've seen Stone Kaech. Are we going to get a chance to see a little bit of Randy Kaech now? It looks like we are. On the left of our screen, Randy Kaech. And we're in time to see... Yeah, up against Arilax. Randy's kind of gone wide. He's got lots of creatures in play there, including...
Got a Glacial Crasher, a Krenko's Enforcer, and a Torch Fiend, and a Forge Devil. It's a nice little curve for him.
But Thundering Giant with Inferno Fists and Hot Soup.
I mean, that just makes sense. How else are you going to keep the soup hot?
Of course. So it now, like that giant, able to attack for 6 unblocked, and then throw around a couple of extra damage if it so chooses.
Kaech does have the Torch Fiend to off the artifact that is giving. It's a really weird, flavorful interaction. Like Torch Fiend is going to destroy a cauldron of hot soup, which
It's going to melt the cauldron.
which all of a sudden makes a giant blockable again. I love Magic so much.
Melting the already hot soup.
Yeah. So, Krenko's Enforcer, this is going to be one of those matchups where it is basically just a gray ogre.
Yeah,
looks like
just a 2/2 for 3.
so those creatures bash over, and that looks like it's going to be a Darksteel Citadel Shrapnel Blast to the face.
Yeah. All right, so good job the Kaeches. Looks like that might actually have been
Game 2.
Game 2
Yeah.
for Randy Kaech.
I thought I saw Ari shuffling up as we switched over to Hayne's match. So looks like right now we've got one match for the Kaeches, and Richie Kaech is up on Craig Wesco. We watched that match first. Alex Hayne managed to eke out his match against Stone Kaech, giving them the win. So things are back against the wall for Craig Wesco right here. He's got to make sure that he wins this and evens things out. And
well, he's got the tools to do it with. I mean, if we look at that board, you know, where do you want to start?
I'd like to start with the 2 Netcaster spiders, it looks like, are on table, as well as 2 Typhoid rats that we see on Richie Kaech's side. Those are 4 excellent defensive creatures, and Craig himself, he's got a couple of awesome cards on his side of the table. The Master of Predicaments?
Yeah, that's the one. So this was the card that was designed by David Sterling, the 4/4 flyer that if it does manage to deal combat damage to a player, then you can choose a card in your hand. They have to guess whether or not its casting cost is greater or less than 4, and if they guess wrong, you get to play it for free. Now, probably not going to get hit through anytime soon because of those Netcaster spiders.
Yeah.
Unless Dauntless River Marshal is able to step in and do something. So 4 mana, Dauntless River Marshal is going to be able to tap down a creature, but with 2 of those spiders, that might not be good enough.
It's an incredibly powerful defense against a blue-white Flyers deck. This is one of those matchups that I'm sure after seeing how things went, Wesco kind of wished he could have played against anybody else in the opposing team. Spiders are kind of a big deal against this blue-white deck, but I'm sure that Craig's got some answers in his deck to make sure that those spiders kind of get pushed out of the way. You've got cards like Turn to Frog, Banishing Light, Oppressive Raise. You've got Constricting Sliver. All of these are cards that are potentially in Wesco's deck that could push one of those spiders out of the way and make things a little bit easier.
And we've already seen a couple of Void Snares in his deck, and even just bouncing one of them for a turn potentially creates a situation where the other one is going to be forced into a block it doesn't want to do. But, I mean, the power of Netcaster Spider to gain 2 power at the point it blocks a flyer means that even Master of Predicaments, which normally it can attack through most spiders, it's going to have trouble with these ones.
All right, that looks like a Flesh to Dust, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so. And
So
1 rare down.
back to the desert from whence the Sphinx came. All right.
Now, Richie Kaech is going to have a little bit of a think here. I don't think he's really in a position where he can start attacking anytime soon. And in the meantime, Craig Wesco, end of turn, tapping 1 spider, setting up to potentially untap and tap down the other spider on his turn.
Yeah, if I were Richie, I'd strongly consider just bashing in at this point.
And that's what he's done. It seems like Richie has his finger on the pulse of this game.
Yeah. Well, Wesco's going to need to get something online relatively soon.
Well, it looks like he's got some tools to work with in his hand there. It's not just holding a grip of lands, which is some kind of a sort of consolation, I suppose. Though I guess that extra lands really don't hurt too much when you've got a Dauntless River Marshal in play.
Exactly. Well, Wesco gets this attack for 2, not quite evening out the damage race that we've got going on right now. But the Geist of the Moors, I believe that card is called, the 3/1 flyer, is going to be able to get through just a little bit more damage. It's going to make Richie Kaech a little bit more leery about attacking with that extra spider after the first one gets tapped down now. It also has the benefit of being able to block ground creatures, should it want to. I don't imagine he wants to block either of the Typhoid rats that would be coming through, but if Kaech does decide that he wants to send one of those spiders over for a little parlay with the Spirit, I'm sure it would be more than happy to answer the call.
Absolutely, and I think that Craig Wesco really here needs to kind of pick his spots quite carefully. It looks like Richie Kaech is pretty sort of happy to let the game go long. He's going to just sneak in for a little bit with his Typhoid rats here and there, and gradually whittle down the Pro Tour winner.
All right, and looks like that is an offensive strike. That Accursed Spirit is going to be completely unblockable against this blue-white deck Wesco's got. And that vampire...
There's a Child of Night there, yeah.
The Child of Night, he's...
I mean, that one I
guy.
think falls into the David Ochoa, things that are overrated, things with 1 toughness camp. But as an extra warm body on the board, it will certainly not hurt Richie Kaech. We see they're struggling to fit all of his creatures into our shot. That's how big and sort of profligate his board is at this point, as Craig Wesco sits back and says, well, I've got this Dauntless River Marshal, which can tap things down, but every turn I'm doing that, I'm not developing my board, and you're developing yours.
Yeah.
So is it kind of just delaying the inevitable?
I mean, Wesco does have an Amph and Path Mage here, which will allow him to sneak past those spiders. Unfortunately, the amount of mana that he's going to have to invest into it is going to lock down his turn, exactly as you were pointing in. It's pointing his resources into getting in for points of damage where he could be developing his board. While Richie Kaech's Accursed Spirit is going to be able to attack freely without the added benefit of needing any activated abilities to be used upon it, as well as the sneakily aggressive Typhoid Rats. They're great defensive creatures, obviously, but they're also effectively unblockable points of damage because your opponent's more often than not going to want to throw away their creature to trade with your 1/1. So
yeah, at least when you're on 15 life.
Exactly. So for much of the game, they get through kind of unfettered.
The Black Lava Axe.
Exactly. For 1 mana, quite the investment.
Amph Path Mage, my pick for favorite creature type in the format.
Ooh, let me see if I can get this right. Salamander Wizard?
That's the one. I love a Salamander.
It's almost as good as, what, Frog Lizard that we saw?
Oh, many Frog Lizard tokens created by...
Rapid Hybridization.
Rapid Hybridization, that's the one. It's the only one.
Yep.
So Dauntless River Marshal here, looking like it's going to be forced into some blocks, which is exactly where Richie Kaech wants to be in this game.
Oh, yeah. I love that, just as I mentioned, yeah, there's probably an auto way that he's going to block with that Geist in the Moors against it. If 1/1 Typhoid Rats, he gets put in a situation where he's considering doing just that.
I mean, this block, it smells like a trick to me. Like,
yeah,
are we going to see a Devouring Light, maybe?
I think we might see a Shields, actually.
Shields would make sense.
Yeah. We also might see 2 creatures go to the graveyard and trade for 2 of Richie's. That is a painful, painful block for Wesco.
I'm trying to work out if there was some trick that Wesco was playing around there that I didn't see. Something he was trying to set up. But
I don't know. That's a very good question.
I mean, as it is, it seems like Richie Kaech has the cards that he needs to just sneak ahead at every turn in this match.
Yeah, so not only does he have the creature advantage, but he's going to be trying to gain the mana advantage here, making sure that he pads his mana pool even more with a Nissa's Expedition.
Yeah, I mean, trying isn't even the start of it.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
If he ever gets to the point where he needs mana for activated abilities, he's got it at this point. If he's got a Genesis Hydra, it's huge.
Yeah.
And as it is, even after all those trades, he's still very definitely the one who's able to be the aggressor in this match.
Certainly. I mean, that 3-point swing every turn for that Accursed Spirit, I mean, it does not need to go long before it adds up to lethal damage.
Not at all, no. And it's funny that sort of, there are some formats that are better than others for Intimidate. This one seems pretty solid. Obviously, a lot of it is matchup dependent, but there's not that many artifact creatures in the mix that can just sort of sneak in the way there and make life troublesome.
Yeah.
Bronze Sables are fine. I actually quite like a Bronze Sable in this format, but it's not got any help, really.
No, I completely agree. I mean, it's like, you have Juggernaut, which is almost never going to be able to sit back and block that guy. You have Willforged Golem, Gargoyle Sentinel. You've got a few cards here and there, but again, it's such a small number of creatures that this blue-white deck basically has no answer to a 3/2 unblockable creature in combat. I
mean, in Team Sealed as well, those artifact creatures, where do you put them? Like, I would assume you just put them wherever they help fill out a curve, or in terms of Willforged Sentinel in your Convoke deck.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of depends. There are options because the blue themes and the red themes that involve artifacts, such as like Scrapyard Mongrel and all of the Aeronaut Tinkerers, that kind of card, you're going to need those cards to be supported by those artifacts. But if you don't have a significant theme one way or the other, they're probably not going to make a deck. They're going to go where they help the most.
So we see Craig Wesco there, again, aggressively trading. He put a Quickling into play, briefly bouncing his Welkin turn, enabling him to get a couple of blocks in to kill off the other Typhoid Rats and another one of Richie Kaech's creatures there. still taking hits from a Cursed Spirit, and he has no blockers now. Functionally speaking, that Welkin turn reads can't block right now.
Yeah.
And Richie Kaech is going to say, well, you know what? If you can't block, then I'm going to attack. In comes the Cursed Spirit. In comes the Netcaster Spider. What are we going to see from Craig Wescoe?
Peels from reality. Takes the Cursed Spirit back to hand and the Welkin turn as well. Gives him a slight reprieve as he is at 3 that a Cursed Spirit would have been lethal in the next turn. Now he has one more turn. Well, no, I guess he's going to have the ability to recast it after combat, isn't he?
Yeah,
so
Richie Kaech just played it just right this game.
Yeah.
I mean, step 1, if the creature doesn't have haste, casting it after combat is probably the right time to cast it. This is exactly why. He's left mana open, he's got more options available to him after combat, so the Peel for Reality didn't really set him back in the slightest. He's gone for an Ancient Silverback here. A slightly bigger creature. I'm not entirely sure that I would have bothered going for this, really, because in some respects, this dies to a Pillar of Light where the Accursed Spirit doesn't.
Right.
And they're both lethal creatures. This one also gets blocked.
That's simple as that.
Yes, it's the bigger creature, but I'm not entirely sure it's the better creature in this circumstance.
It is a lethal attack. By that Peel from Reality, Craig got to put himself at 6 as opposed to going down to 3. So technically, what he knows his opponent's only creature the only creature he knows of is that Welkin turn, which can't block the Silverback. The Silverback does represent lethal damage this turn.
Okay, yeah. One way or another, I think that Richie Kaech in the luxurious position of having a little bit of room to play around against a Pro Tour champion.
Yeah.
His moment in the sun here, very much coming. Here comes the Silverback. Here comes the Spider. Does Craig Wescoe have something? Looks like he might.
Ooh, and Pillar of Light, as prescribed by, well, you, Tim.
Yep. And regeneration, not going to help there. Richie Kaech reaches for his forest, but it's not going to help.
Yeah. By all means.
Yeah, the ape's getting exiled.
Yeah. I think this is being clarified at the moment, but so an Ancient Silverback with a regeneration shield is now going to be exiled from the game. So Wesco will drop to 4. Now all he's really got to worry about is that Netcaster Spider, but there's going to be an Accursed Spirit that hits the table, I would imagine, within the next 2 or 3 seconds. That's going to grip him something that he's got to think about the next turn.
And it looks like Randy Kaech there just giving a little bit of support there to Richie, pointing out a couple of options available to him. Always nice to have options, always nice to have a second opinion.
Yeah. One of the best parts about the team format is if you're ever unsure about a play, you've always got the ability to ask your teammates what they think they should do in any given situation.
And there we have it. There's the Accursed Spirit. A little bit of mana left up top there if he needs to cast a few spells on his opponent's turn. Craig Wescoe draws for his turn. He's going to need something pretty good here.
All right. He is at 6 divided by 4 life.
Apparently 6 divided by 4 is 4, because the 4 is currently the life total he's on. He's attacking with his Welkin turn.
Yeah.
Getting in a couple of points.
Yeah. Frostlinks buys him an additional turn, tapping down that Accursed Spirit. Blue creatures might not be able to block it, but they certainly can target it.
So Richie Kaech there untapping everything but the Accursed Spirit. That not untapping thanks to the ability of Frostlinks.
Yep.
And Richie plays his land.
He's still got a good attack with that Netcaster
He's
Spider.
got a Titanic Growth in hand as well.
A very good attack.
I mean, realistically here, Craig Wescoe, he's got to be blocking anyway, right?
Almost certainly. If for no other reason than it gives him an opportunity to not die to that Accursed Spirit on the following turn.
So Craig Wescoe draws for his turn. I mean, he's got spells. He's getting in the token points of damage, given that he knows that that Welkin turn is not a blocker.
Yeah, can't miss a swing, man. All right, and the never-ending stream of Void Snares comes down, and Precinct Captain as well. So
Precinct Captain, we see there Richie Kaech having a little read. The most important ability on this 2/2 right now is First Strike.
Certainly.
But in principle, it does do a little bit more. So if it deals combat damage to an opponent, you get to
slide a soldier from your hand into play, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, sorry, it's actually when it attacks. So in principle, Craig Wescoe, if he survives this next turn, gets to perhaps get a soldier for free. But in the meantime, he needs to worry about Netcaster Spider coming in.
Yeah.
As a 2/3, it's exactly the right size to kill off a preeminent captain as and when it blocks.
Oh, that's preeminent. Precinct Captain is the other awesome first striking 2-powered creature.
The captains, they all have first strike.
Oh my goodness.
They lead from the front.
That's very, very true. All
And
right.
Wesco here is saying, you know what? I can't risk it. Your spider is going to continue to dominate this match.
Yep. Lead the charge. Live by the sword, die by the sword, right? Well, die by the spider.
Yeah, that spider has done work. And here's a cursed spirit. I kind of want the spider to do the last points.
I
I feel like it would be appropriate for this match.
It's worked so hard.
And then a cursed spirit just comes along and goes, nope, sorry, I got this.
KS, man. Not cool. Not cool. I mean,
So
Wesco did manage to knock Richie Kaech down to single-digit life. We'll see if he's able to do anything about this attack right here. Both of those creatures are lethal, little does Craig know, due to the Titanic growth. Or, I guess, now he knows.
Yep. Richie's like, you know what? I'm going to show you it. Oof.
Oh, and
There's
he
a banishing
chooses
light.
the one that would... All right, so managed to get a 2-for-1 and Devouring Light, the creature that he's not going to be able to block. So he's going to go to a mere 2, but stays alive this turn and eats 2 of the very, very important cards Richie's got for him to deal with.
Elvish Mystic, at this point, a formidable attacker.
Yeah. That Devouring Light was massive, though.
Yeah, Craig Wesco able to successfully find a rear guard action that keeps him in this game, and Welkenterm gradually doing work.
Curious how long Wesco had that in his hand, because if he managed to play out the Frostlinks and the Void Snare that entire time, just basically forcing Kaech to commit to that 3-2 and using that 4 mana every single turn to do that, it's a great way to string along opportunities to get in for 2 damage and possibly close the game out before securing his own safety with that Devouring Light.
So Richie Kaech there, he was thinking about playing one more spell. Looks like a little bit of intervention from his team kept him off that plan. Welkenturn continuing to fly in. Richie Kaech now on 7.
All right, looks like 2 cards in hand.
Is that Garruk Apex Predator?
Oh, I sure hope not. For Wesco's sake. Oh, he's counting mana. It can never be that good when you count mana like that.
And I think the suggestion is, why don't you rumble in first and see what happens there?
Yeah, you might not need to cast a spell. Your opponent might just be dead on board.
And then you get to do the still had all these.
Oh, wow.
So the reason for our synchronized wowing there was a Resolute Archangel in Craig Wesco's hand. Resolute Archangel saying that when it enters the battlefield, if your life total is less than your starting life total, it becomes equal to your starting life total.
So if you're at 2, it goes back up to 20.
Really, really easy for our life